what we're going to cover today. The main topic, you can see this, right? How to lead an organization through 21st century transformation. The notion that a lot of companies right now are rules-based, compliance, uniformity. And how do you go from this kind of factory floor type supervisor style to what is work today, no matter what industry you're in? And so that's what we're going to cover. It's a pretty exciting topic. It's led to some pretty cool discussions. We had a hour and a half discussion just this week with the former head of the US Navy. It's a 4-star admiral, amazing individual. And that we're going to share parts of that discussion with the group as well, which all kind of fit into this. So that is what we're going to get to. But first,
oh, happy anniversary, COA. Yeah, it's like, geez.
That's crazy. 1 year, right?
What?
1 year. Yeah, no, I see Laura's like, yes. This is the sign language clap, right? 1 year we've been at this.
Yes. And it's felt like a year.
It felt like a year. It has felt like a year. It's interesting. We were talking the other day how in so many ways great things happen and start accidentally. The idea of COA literally accidentally started because we were worried about our friends and family and our employees just not having the right rituals in place of working out and yoga nidra sleep classes. So we built COA just to help them.
Yeah.
And then in a matter of weeks, it went from like 100, 200 people to like close to 100,000 coming in a week because it just started expanding through friends and family and through then perks at work, and just didn't plan to go this way, did not plan to go every week. And we found the gig workers that we provided income to when we had a physical office, they had their incomes go to zero. And so this has been for most of them the only source of income. And so we get a lot of love notes from all the different instructors who also love the community and love the good they're doing. People are sending them, crazy, amazing notes of the impact that they've had on whether it's children or, on getting promoted and getting new jobs, on leadership classes to health and sleep and whatnot. So it's been not what we expected. And it's interesting, Megan and I were reflecting why we started teaching this LIP class, Leadership in Practice. In many ways, this also happened somewhat accidentally, where we have trained less than 5,000 leaders in person in our offices over 7 years. We run this pro bono leadership academy that used to be monthly, it runs every other month. This is before COVID. And we fly in usually up to, or we don't actually, they fly in themselves, but we host them for 3 full days. They live in our office. And it's the who's who of people. You can imagine a global level, with usually 1,000 people on a wait list at any given point. But they literally park themselves and watch how we train, coach, and run our company. They do exercises class with us. All of them will do dance class they will do yoga nidra classes. And we have around 150 that will go in between our London, Boston, and New York office. San Francisco is too small. And we just did that for 7 years straight, never charged, but we're highly selective in who we took. So always getting applications. And so it's crazy that we were able to reach that many leaders over that many years. Yet in a year in COA, we reached around 100 times that number. So you see the power of sort of an online tool.
Yeah.
Once again, never planned this way, but of these 5,000 leaders, what's interesting is we always gave and looked for good people. Our view was always that finding that combo of highly competent and good from within, sort of a rare combo. You find a lot of highly competent evil people, but you find a lot of good from within people, not very competent. And getting that combo was always our basis of screening. And then we took referrals coming in from, when you find one good person, they know others. And that's how we grew our whole kind of pro bono efforts of educating and sharing leadership and how to run companies. But so a lot of them are the ones who have come and spoken at COA. And all these speakers, we've never paid any of them. And so the only people we pay are the gig workers who need the income. But we're talking about, famous authors like Bill Urey, who wrote the top book in negotiations, to, Daniel Coyle, who wrote the books in Talent Code and, Culture Code. The list goes on to number 3 in the Space Force, to the deputy director of the CIA, 3-star admirals. We've had the who's who, and there's still a long list, but very quickly into it, Mega and I saw that it's going to be hard to sustain interesting new speakers all the time, which is what led to the creation of a series. And so we launched the first series and decided that we're going to commit to teach. And we put initially 1 of N being, we didn't know when it would end.
Yeah.
So we just put like some infinite number, but our thought was we'll probably do a 10-part series, kind of like a Netflix series. Did not expect, this is number 46. So did not expect us to go not as long as we would, because we first thought the whole pandemic would end in a month, right? And so we thought like COA would end in a month. Did not expect this. We're at number 46. Yeah. We have come up and created content. And initially we're like, how are we going to create original content every week, right? For 46 weeks. And now we're in this other side where we have too much content, overstimulated. So, you know, I know one of the challenges, I don't know if Dan is here, is challenging, can Charlie end this class within an hour or less?
Walker, are you with us?
Right, so I'm going to try again, 3 in a row at least, and then I can go back to my 2-hour classes. Just kidding, but
maybe
but,
not, yeah.
But yeah, so anyways, welcome.
Yeah, and it's kind of ironic. I feel we're going to have a good presentation today. So that is a question we've been trying to answer for a long time. I think, you know, it's not 52 weeks of LIP, it's 46 weeks, but it's the anniversary for COA. I think being able to answer this question of how do you upgrade an organization to go from the 20th century to the 21st century. So if you're a leader of other people, which most of you are, or you're just trying to learn how to just be a leader, but
you might be trending to be
might be trending to be one. Listen up. We've got some good stuff.
Yeah. So should I just go into it? I know we usually do all kinds of life events stuff, but since I already took 10 minutes of my random,
if you have stuff, put it right in while we're pulling up the presentation.
Yeah, punch it. We love sort of like birthdays, anniversaries. I know we have a lot of challenging things. We've met a lot of people. We're actually having a conversation with the former IG 3-star Admiral of the Navy after this.
Is Chris's baby here? Sorry, I'm looking for you, Chris, now. God, where's Chris?
Oh, I see Chris. Is he holding the baby?
Where?
I see Chris.
Oh.
Wait, Chris, you got to lift the baby up.
Oh my God, but he's wearing his shirt. Where's the baby?
You can't lift the baby up? It's right below him.
Can
you like do like one of those Simba things where you can,
Simba.
No, you can't. No.
He's like, I'm a new dad. I don't know what I'm doing. Oh my God,
wow.
look, Chris,
wow, that is so tiny.
She's so cute.
So tiny.
A little bit.
Yeah.
Sleeping. Yeah. Oh my God, you look so natural, Chris. You look so natural. I feel like I met you.
Did you drop the baby? Did you drop? No, he didn't drop it. Sorry, no.
Chris, I feel like when I met you,
you just know that this little Squirmy McSquirmington is keeping me quite busy. Yeah, she's at least a cute little nugget. 1 second though.
Wow. Oh, he's got the thing around the waist. Oh my goodness,
it's the human burrito. He's got the burrito thing going.
Remember that thing?
I remember when I don't know if you get newborn, you have to learn how to do that swaddle thing.
Oh.
It's like rocket science.
No, actually, there's a trick to it.
Yeah, I mean, and then I realized after that, I'm like,
Boppy. That's right, Lindsay. It's the Boppy.
Yes.
Oh,
wow,
so pretty, Chris.
Wow.
Congrats.
It looks a little bit like eyes are not opening, like just kind of like darkness.
Oh, she just food time.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, she's done.
Wow. No, this is impressive. Where you're talking about, this is leadership in practice. For real.
Oh yeah.
You're learning about leadership, trying to listen and take notes, take care of the baby, right? Just don't forget about the baby in the process, but I like it. All right. So with that, we're gonna get off Chris and go into this presentation. Give me a second.
Chris, I feel like I knew you when you were just a child, and now you're like a dad. It's freaking me out. It's like when our employees have kids.
He's still a child. It's just that he's a child with even a smaller child now.
Like I just.
Laura, is the bottom bar there, or is it?
I don't see the bar.
You don't see the bottom bar? I know we have this bottom bar issue that.
So we're meaning it's good.
Okay, I think it's good. All right. All right, I'm gonna go in. All right. So quick announcements real quick. Last week, one of the things we talked about, we have this whole tiered structure going from LIP. I hope you join one of the workshop small groups. We call them PRT for pre-resiliency training. That's when someone said group 9, they're all free. Please sign up. We put you in groups of 10, incredible networking, but also weekly 1-hour rituals. And we introduced this notion of a learning tour. And so kind of for the different coaches. And so PRTs graduate up to what we call leadership think tanks. That's what LTT stands for. So Megan and I run the very top one, which is what we call the Leadership Think Tank A. And then there are 3 groups of B and the 4th coming soon, which there's a lot of discussion behind the scenes. But I want to share sort of what we're going to do in terms of these learning tours, because we have access, unparalleled access to like literally nearly 5,000 leaders that owe us for all the giving we have given to them. So when we go and visit, they open their doors and show us stuff that usually you never see. So first for Tom and Lokia, who run one, Greg and Rachel / John, who run the Boston one, Trun and Kevin one in the UK. This is news for them. You're in charge of your own learning tours. So Charlie and Megan are not going to be setting up your tours for you. So recognize you need to think about what you're going to do with your team. But what we will do as Next Jump is we will cover the cost of travel to take you to their local location. So Tom and Lokia's group comes to New York and something local. Greg, Rachel, John towards Boston, Trun and Kevin towards UK. So I know we have people from all over the world. So we'll be covering in leadership think tanks the cost for your travel to come and.
Oh my God, Heidi's so cute. Sorry, Heidi, you're at the bottom of my thing. You look like you just want a car.
Right?
Just like on Oprah.
So
like, you get a car.
now at the very top, this is kind of, it's the higher level, which everyone can graduate up, right? We have people moving up and up. In A, we will travel anywhere in the world. And so we're giving you sort of our 3 choices that we're tossing between right now. The FBI owes us a favor. And so to go to them, we've trained their leadership in here quite a bit. And so that's one option. The other group is a really cool group called the Other Side Academy. They're reformed prison convicts who have then become entrepreneurs. And this is a awesome group that literally, they're in Utah. Yeah. And there's a long story how we took in training them, but they owe us some big favors, and for us to go and see what they do. And they're all about no LHF, no lying, hiding, faking, brutal truth. And that's the only way they can keep each other honest. But it's a cool group to go see. And the last group that we have an invite to is to actually go to India. And so T-Gelf is a foundation run by one of the top 10 billionaires in India. And he brings in 200 of his top, like who's who of people. We're talking about like rubbing elbows with the top movie directors in the world, like actors and, business CEOs of all sorts and whatnot, philanthropists. And then he brings around 300 people he has adopted that he coaches. And so it'll be a trip that, once again, they treat us like royalty, but we will be covering, in this case, for Leadership Think Tank A, business class travel plus lodging and costs wherever we go. So, international business travel is kind of cool, but the US one's cool too. So just to give you a sense of what's kind of coming around the corner in the plan. So
yeah, Ruth was saying probably some amazing stories at the Other Side Academy. Just real quick, we actually did have a few people come from the Other Side Academy years ago to our Leadership Academy, right? Mm-hmm. It was controversial because one of the individuals coming had it was a criminal record. It was a really intense thing that he was put into jail for. So it was on the edge of, do you let him come to our offices or not? And there was a concern about safety for our employees. Is this the right thing? He's been, rehabilitated, but what he was in for was not something that, it was a tough one. So we ended up letting him come with the leader of that group. And it was a really powerful, with probably on our YouTube channel somewhere. After 3 days of getting to spend time with educators, military, all of the highest leaders CEOs across the organization, CEOs, he, at the last day, we do a reflection, and he stood up and he was one of the first people to speak, to share his reflection. And he shared, I can't believe I'm in a room with people like this. I've never been on a plane. This is my first time I've never been on a plane. So to come to New York, and the fact that I get to be in a room with people like you is like something he never thought he'd be able to do, because he thought he'd be in jail for the rest of his life. And to be able to experience something like that, it was unbelievable.
He brought the whole room to tears. And he shared, he's I know the discussions behind the scenes were not easy to let me come. But the fact that you guys took a chance and let me come changing my life. I mean, it was awesome. Yeah. It was awesome. And it's cool because you're with such high-powered people, but we all treat each other like human beings. Equal. And so that's the power, which hopefully is what you experience through LIP and through the PRTs and everything we're doing. All right, so going into the lesson, I'm gonna bring you into a conversation Megan and I had this week alone. It's the former head of the Navy. He wrote an article, and there's a diagram he shared. And I'm gonna walk you through kind of what this means. And the part of it that really matters most is what I wrote on top, which were these three words that he focused on.
Yeah.
Trust,
Yeah.
balance, and stability.
Mhm.
I want you to think of a physical hourglass, right? And think of the top of the hourglass being trust,
Yeah.
the middle being balance, and stability being the bottom. And he was talking about kind of what happens with the sands of time when you look at an hourglass and how leaders have to oftentimes flip the hourglass around. So you're now seeing trust at the bottom and stability on top, and stability, the sand is draining and moving into trust. And these things are kind of opposite ends. But the center is interesting because when you look at the center of the hourglass is where the sand is moving so fast. It's where the tactical things occur. And oftentimes we get stuck in the, oh my God, everything's spinning and moving so fast. And to understand the connection between the trust and stability and how you have to flip these things around. And in the middle is where there's like just a chaos and speed going on.
Mhm.
And recognize this is what leadership is about. And that led to then an interesting discussion. So I'm going to look at the diagram in the upper right. I'm going to reuse it, right? So think of the hourglass: trust, balance, stability, and imagine moving these things up and down. And what happens in the analogy of the sand moving through, exchanging from stability into trust and so forth. So we then went to talk about a slide that we had covered in the much earlier LIP class. This is something that we were told and shared with us from the top people in education, the Harvard Ed School, how schools were created as a training ground for work. And the entire discussion was around, if you look from the very right, which is the 21st century, and what people are looking to do in schools now, and what workplaces are doing, and then you look backwards, and how most organizations are still running that old organization, focused on, some may still have isolation and fear as the top drivers, but most are working towards a rules-based compliance, uniformity. Everyone does the same thing. It's about fairness and getting everyone in similar pay grades and levels. And think about the almost the somewhat, in hindsight, dumb methodologies of promotion is based on just how many years of service you've had. Like, it's assuming if you've just been here for 2 years, you must be savvy enough, good enough to then be promoted. Or if you've been here 5 years, everything is done on this kind of rudimentary metric that's so not how human beings operate today. And so we're talking about, how do you move from this old organization to the new? And this discussion was how challenging the shift is, which led to then, this is really like our hand-drawn thing we talked about. So let me explain to you what's on this crazy page. Picture this hourglass that I mentioned, right? But picture it sideways now. Trying to move from stability, what we're familiar with is what we're actually feeling stable on. And yet, if there is a leader today that is not talking about the points on the right side, not about the supervisor who wants discipline, follow orders. I mean, now with YouTube and the ability to video record anyone, if there was a leader that's probably out there screaming about isolation and fear as principles, or you must follow the rules and whatnot, I mean, their careers will be ruined the minute someone gets a video clip and then posts it. They're talking on the right. Everyone that we've met in leadership, no matter even how bureaucratic and even government the organization might be, they're talking about the need to collaborate and innovate and make decisions and be creative and, like work as a team and talk and communicate, like brainstorm. They're talking on the right because if you don't have trust. People will not trust you as an individual, as a leader, if you don't talk the language that's on the right. And yet we're running organizations with the stability of what we're familiar with, and trying to make this change. Right at the center is that balance point. And so the discussion went into an interesting insight we were given several years back for some researchers, that when they studied any living organism, anything organic, so not machines, but anything organic, if you change more than 2% to start, you will see that things will fall apart. Any living organism, when you change more than 2% to start, you will see it's changing too much too fast, and the living organism will reject the change. And I'm sure we've seen a lot of people come into organizations trying this.
What do you think about this? So Lindsay from Infotech was saying it's fascinating that the assumption in the 20th century is that the only place for people to go in their careers was management. But not everyone wants to be a leader or a manager their career, yet they end up there.
So this is a constant debate and discussion we hear. Does everyone have to be a leader? Right? Are there roles for people not to be a leader? Now that really
Yes.
goes down to the root question of what do you mean by leader?
What's the job of a leader?
Right.
What's the number one
like,
job
what do you
for the-
mean?
Yeah.
What do you mean?
Yeah.
Because, you know, if
Yeah.
we went even in this class and did a survey of what does that mean to be a leader, you will find 100 people likely giving 100 different definitions. The word is so overused, it's lost meaning. We get asked a lot,
Mhm.
what's the difference between a manager and a leader? And I'm like, what? They kind of have to do both. There's
Yeah.
no person now that doesn't manage things as
Mhm.
well as lead. You have to do both. And so what we found to be most effective in this discussion of leadership was
Yeah.
this, that the number one job, the function,
The function.
the job function, if you had to write a job description of a leader, is to make decisions. And this showed up in the research as well.
Yeah.
Now, decisions is the theoretical term for something that happens in practice, which is judgment calls.
Yes.
And I like the term judgment calls, but nobody likes to have their judgment questioned. They don't mind having their decisions questioned, but they're the exact same thing.
Mhm.
So we go to schools and
Mhm.
lectures about decision making. We all want to become better decision makers.
Mhm.
But wait, are you questioning my judgment? They're the exact same thing. Decision making involves a lot of what we call system 2 or analytics, as well as your intuitive skills from experience. Judgment usually refers
Right.
to fast decision making. And fast decision making is actually the most unique human contribution, which is why it is the asset you want to improve.
Yeah, and so because Carla from the Navy, she's asking, you know, we're struggling with that. How do you motivate the technical experts if all the high grade positions are managers, right? And some of those technical experts don't want to be a manager, right? And that's why you're
No, but I'm saying
to
forget manager,
define it
forget-
as a leader
forget-
who has to
and
make
even
decisions
if you
and
struggle with the
needs good
term leader,
judgment.
if you struggle with the term leader, saying you cannot have a position now in any company, any
Yeah.
organization
Yeah,
that does not see
Use-
having better judgment as the number one requirement
Yeah.
for success.
Yeah.
No matter how technical or non-technical, when you get yelled at, right, by a boss or supervisor or whoever you want to call it, they're yelling at you for poor judgment.
Mhm.
How could you do? How could you not ask for help? How could you make this mistake? They're upset at you for your poor judgment. When you get promoted, it's because they like your judgment. They trust you to take charge, take ownership, right? To move without much guidance. You know, the people they say,
Yeah.
like, I can give them just 2 words and a napkin and they figure out how to do the rest.
Mhm.
Those are people, if you describe it, have really great judgment. And so the entire
Yes.
work we've done for the last decade has been performance evaluations, right? That's in the military, it's called fit reps.
Yeah.
But performance evaluations is the hindsight score of how a human being has performed in their job, in their organization. It's the outcome. And we're way too outcome focused. And the most frustrating thing when you get a performance eval is, you know, that's great, but I wish you told me that sooner, because telling me I have to wait another year before I have another shot, you know, at this promotion because of these mistakes you never told me about, meaning it's at the outcome. Well, I'm sorry, we're not promoting you because you were good in this, but you didn't perform well here. So the outcome of your performance is saying, I can't bonus you more. I can't promote you right now. Versus we've obsessed on what is the leading indicator to that performance evaluation, meaning judgment. How do you score and measure human judgment?
Mhm.
And how do you find a way to make it transparent to a human being so they don't have to wait till the sum total of their 1 year judgment calls led to success or failure, promotion or non-promotion, bonus or not, right?
Can I just get to this?
Sorry,
So
yeah.
Karen, who we coached last week in the
Yes.
quick fire, and then Jay is, you know, the 2%. She's saying we are already toast. Our environment has already changed way more. How do we recover?
Yeah.
You know, and Jay's saying, why do you think we have so many problems over the last year? Like so much has changed already. Like I think we're going to get into what that 2% is.
So the part you will find is this. It's kind of like if you ever try to do a diet and whatnot.
Mhm.
I mean, you want to go Google search how to do a diet, an overabundance of advice.
Advice.
Right now, we're inundated with people telling us what to do. I mean, literally, I have 12-year-olds giving me advice on how to diet. I'm like, God, at 12, I didn't even have to diet. Like, what are you talking about? How would you know?
Yeah.
They're like, Google searched it. I know this stuff. I watched a video, read a book, right? I might even give a speech on it. Like, it's like everyone's an expert somewhere,
Yeah.
right? We have information at our fingertips and everyone's an expert giving advice on pretty much everything, which leads to way too many things to try and do. But remember, everything you try, we always say, the cost that you have of every attempt is that when it goes wrong, it increases the cost of your next attempt. The next time you try a new idea, everyone's gonna be like, oh, this again? Last time it really didn't work, but you're supposed to listen this time. They're like, this time I promise it's the right one. So you have to be cautious, which is why we talk about a gated process. But by the way, so a lot of organizations right now are trying a lot of stuff. Now, COVID and the acceleration of what happened in 2020 did something interesting when we look back in history. This move from the old organization into the new. History has shown that 20% of a way into a new century, the new 100 years, the old model will fall apart to the point where you have no choice but to burn the bridges back to the comfort zone and stability of the old, and you have to go to new. So you're seeing organizations scrambling to find a way, even if you're like Department of Education and the government, to try to go to the new, because anyone holding on to the old at this point, it's no longer stable. It's falling apart. That what was once stable is so unstable, you have no choice but to go and find new ground on the right side. So that is what's leading to the scurry of trying a lot of stuff.
Can I just mention one more thing? So Hamish is saying, my problem, most of my previous leaders can't/won't coach me on how to improve my judgment. Okay. And then I like what Carla said, Hamish, I always ask leaders why they make decisions they make, not to question it, but to learn. So we have a different,
what was the second question? Why they make the decisions they make?
Yeah, so Carla's suggesting, right? Ask the leader who you're working for why they make the decisions they make, not to question them, but to learn their judgment, right? Why they made that judgment call.
So the best way to ask that question, because usually when you ask that question, most people think you're passive aggressively trying to say you made a bad call.
I think you made a wrong call.
Right? And I'm trying to act curious.
Yes.
The better question to ask is, can you help me understand the underlying assumptions that led to this decision? And the logic, just walk me through your logic. We had an earlier LIP class, I forget where it is, called Ladders of Inference. I'm looking at a wall to see if I can find it fast, but we can probably find it. But ladders of inference is the key. We are trained to not share our ladders of inference. And the reason is this, because if I actually shared the data points that led to, those are my assumptions, and oftentimes they're faulty assumptions, and my logic, which can sometimes be crazy, of why I made this call, you might mock me. You might laugh at me. So as a result of it, it's better to hide that decision of the details and just show you, well, I think this is the right call. And so there's a whole process there of kind of how to navigate bosses better or supervisors better.
It also starts with understanding yourself better and the self-awareness.
But we're going to cover some cool stuff. Some of these questions, you're going to love what we're going to cover. What was it? One of the other questions that was really good? Sorry, we're like super tired. So I'm like,
this is another question that was really good.
I can't remember. But let me take you through, because I think you're going to see some pretty cool stuff in this. So anyways, this discussion led to something very interesting that the number of overstimuli led to this. So watch what this says on the very top. This idea of crawl, walk, then run. Level 2 up there. Almost every leadership training program, and anyone that's really good out there, starts at level 2. They're built, and the more expensive they are, right? They're built literally for people who have already made it through the gauntlet, and they're the best of the best. And so they already have, without even realizing them, baked in, set of fundamentals, brilliant in the basics. And so most of the training in level 2 goes straight into training how you think. It's all around narratives and rewriting narratives, looking forward, looking backwards, helping you unpack the baggage you have from the past. And so almost every leadership training program out there starts at level 2. And yet this is the problem. They're assuming, and if you ever listen to any leadership podcasts and whatnot, you'll see they assume a lot of stuff. And of course they have to have, creativity, and they have to have grit, and they throw all these things in as if it's just a given that you're born with this stuff.
You should already be able to learn how to learn. You should be able to get feedback, take feedback,
give feedback,
process it, get better. You should be gritty. You should never give up.
And then you're like, wait, how do I do these 12 things you just rattled off? And then while talking, they'll rattle 6 more things. And so they're built already for people that passed earlier levels. And so without accounting for what's already assumed, they go straight into level 2. Yet universally, in almost any field, you need to be able to break it down and get to the root starting point, which is what we call level 1. And then you'll see there's a transition window as you change levels, which is why it's called level 1-2. If you don't transition correctly, you'll revert back to level 1. But if you do transition correctly, you'll upgrade. And so that's an important step as well, which most people like to skip or forget about. Now, what's interesting about level 1, most people say, well, I'm already past that. I don't need brilliant the basics. I know how to eat. I know how to do all this stuff. I know how to, give feedback, take feedback. I'm telling you, most of us were never trained properly in the bits, the brilliant the basics. I'll give you a quick story. Years ago, there was I don't know if the team still, if this group's still around. When you think of the NBA, professional basketball, the players that play NBA oftentimes get to where they are simply through natural talent. They're incredibly gifted, whether they're incredibly gifted at shooting or just athletic prowess, and they make it far, but then they get stuck in their careers. And so this one NBA coach decided that I'm going to create a boot camp for NBA players, as in the best basketball players in the world. But the only thing he's teaching in the boot camp, called it Brilliant the Basics, where the basics of like footwork and dribbling, I mean, just things that you would learn when you first start playing basketball. And what he found was by creating a program that was based on the fundamentals of the basics of the game, these top basketball players of the world who were already in the NBA and their careers were stalling and stuck, they started to take off again. All of us, whether we're starting from the beginning or we might have reached a rut in our careers. We're talking about this.
Plateauing. One
One of the biggest ruts people reach is what they call an imposter syndrome. I feel like an imposter now. I'm being given credit. I'm supposed to be able to do this stuff well, but I really feel I'm stuck and I'm spiraling. And a lot of us reach places where I was successful once before, but I've been downward spiraling and it's almost like, when you say the best years of my life were in high school, God, if I can go back to high school, God, I was so smart, so popular, like, whoa. That's like 20 years ago or 30 years ago, or if it's best years of life or college. You want to look forward. Instead, you kind of wish you can go back in time.
And the hardest thing to do is to reset to where you are now and not living in the past saying, remember when no, you're not right now. It's like that acceptance of you're not right now, and to reset. Actually, because this is the question I missed. Tivani had asked, basically the same question, but when you're pushed to task and you do not perform to expectation, how do you deal with that? That's the imposter, right? Because now you're promoted. You got promoted because you're good at your job. Now you're promoted to do more.
And usually that you're promoted because then now they think you can do even more stuff, right? Until you try to do it and it doesn't work.
Right. It's like
right? And then you're like, uh-oh.
Right.
Should they not have promoted me? Do they know the truth of me, which is I really have no idea what I'm doing? That's the imposter syndrome creeping in. And before you know it, when we talk about downward spirals, right? They always say football games, people hate fumbles. Fumbles don't lose the game. It's the 6 errors that follow the fumble that make you lose the game. How many fumbles do we have that turn into a downward spiral? And they say usually when you accumulate 7 mistakes in a row, 7 bad judgment calls is when the accident occurs. You could be fired, you could be demoted, you could be moved off a project. I mean, bad things, someone quits on you. Bad things happen when you accumulate 7 or more mistakes in a row. And usually those mistakes will show up over 3 months or 90 days. Now, when you are now spiraling, and I think we've all felt that we're mentally spiraling in my head, I'm second guessing everything. I no longer trust myself. How do you reset? How do I ground back up? What a sports team will do when a coach calls a timeout, because you see spiraling sometimes, they want to reset, right? So that I can then go back out. What is that timeout? What is that reset? And what do I reset to?
So Josh Hart's asking, is the imposter syndrome just the S curve of development? Meaning, is it just part of the process?
The imposter syndrome?
Is that what you're saying, Josh?
Well, the thing that is still so not understood, the strongest muscle we hold is the human brain. It is both the best thing we have and also the worst thing for us, right? It literally is fighting constantly to do 2 opposing things. I want to learn new things and try difficult new stuff to grow, but I want to also protect myself. I think in research, they call it the psychological immune system. So when
Yeah.
you talk about this S curve and whatnot, it's the psychological immune system that's making you go schizo and haywire,
Mhm.
right? And you have like an angel and devil
Yeah, I
sitting
want
on
to
either
grow,
shoulder.
but I want to protect myself, right? I
Don't-
want to hear your feedback, but how dare you talk to me that way?
Don't-
I'm amazing. Accept me for who I am.
Yes, and it's always at opposing ends. It's like an angel and devil on your
Yeah.
shoulder, both like little mini versions of you.
Mhm.
You are great. You really suck. You don't know what you're doing. No, I think you can do it. Like it's like, and they're fighting, and you're like, which one's winning, right? And every day we're going through these battles, right? And the higher up we go, these little angel and devils just are larger in size. So picture the physical weight of these large. It's like the size of Chris's baby sitting on your shoulders.
Yes.
They're kind of small, but they'll grow to the size of like Megan sitting on your shoulders, and depending on which one's growing, it can wreak havoc.
Mm-hmm.
So the question is this: how do you break out of that? And the answer lies in level 1. When you learn level 1, right? And level 1 is an endless level to upgrade. Level 1 is the key. When we spend time with Josh Waitzkin, top chess player in the world, and he learned his martial art, you know how he won, especially in martial arts? He learned the most basic move, and he said, I am going to do this simple basic move, one move, better than any human being on this planet. Bibs, brilliant the basics, there's magic in it. So crawl, walk before you run, but we're going to dive into the first one.
Carl's
Crawl.
saying it's hard to be patient at level 1 when you're not sure how long you need to be there. But everybody's saying,
Wow.
Carla, Hyde, they're all saying they feel that where it's like, I've succeeded before in a different pose. So I
Mm.
know I'm in something new. I have to relearn stuff, but I'm
Right,
kind of
so-
awesome and
so-
I've done good work before.
So one of our investors, Stan Schrager, he was the head of HR at Chase, JP Morgan Chase. And he said one of the biggest things he's seen in his career is when people move from job to job, they always want to just continue where they
Yes.
last left off.
Yes.
Versus they have to start at zero and build back up. And they think, I already paid my dues. I shouldn't do that. They don't realize, it's almost like, imagine if you dated one person and moved to a new relationship. I just want to continue right where we
Yeah.
left off.
Yeah, you can.
You need to start at zero again. Hello.
Yeah.
Yeah, I went to school. I mean, versus like, you should know all this. Shouldn't you know? Just talk to my ex and find out everything they know and just continue the relationship. You got to start back, but you'll catch up faster. And that's the thing people
Yeah.
don't understand.
You catch up faster.
You have to reset to the basics, to level 1, but you will accelerate out of it faster. The more you do it and the better.
Mhm.
And that's the notion of what. So this S curve, instead of going really long, it will tighten. It's the heartbeat. Instead of going, bloop,
Yeah.
bloop, it'll go,
Yeah.
boop, 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 boop. It just moves faster.
And
So-
don't waste time trying to start running in the new thing when you actually have to crawl, right? It's
Yes.
a waste of time.
So this is the developmental GPS. This took 10 years to get to this spot, research and everything. So if you haven't seen it, a lot of the past lips have this, but I'm going to take you through the components of thinking of crawl right in the middle, then walk, and then run. And once again, the mistake in theory is people think, let's start with the mind. So let's start with running. And then when that doesn't work, I'm going to try to teach you to crawl before you, or walk. So crawl before you walk.
Mhm.
In practice, the order is different. You have to start here. And then as you start to get momentum, you start to look for walking, which eventually turns into running, and then you repeat the cycle. And so this is the level 1, level 2, right? 1, 2, sorry, and level 2. So let me dive into this a little bit more, right? So this is a slide that we put together last night, pretty late, the 2%. So I think about like Dev's GPS, number 5 on the right and number 3 on the left. Number 5 is basically being able to tell the truth. Don't trim your thoughts, right? Don't filter your thoughts. Do you have even one person where you can just unfiltered talk truth? Not have to politically correct, pick careful words, just what's on your mind? Non-filtered talk. And then can you upgrade to even a higher level where it's more than one person, maybe even a larger group? On the left side, we're talking about ritualizing small actions. But what I put here in the red boxes are the 2 biggest, most common errors that show up for individuals. Individuals, but also companies and teams.
Too, yeah.
On the left, for doing your job, it's chasing the big idea. How many of you are just waiting for that big idea?
What's
How many,
this?
who's coming up with a big idea? Let's have a big idea day. How about a big idea meeting? Let's big idea our way out of this mess, right? I'm waiting for my perfect job, my perfect spouse, my perfect opportunity. You're all of us look for this allure of this big idea coming. Now on the right side, there's this notion of our mind is powerful, so I'm going to talk to myself, right?
Yeah.
In a positive fashion. The positivity movement went overboard. to the point where we are actually convinced that we have the ability to brainwash ourselves by just speaking positive.
I am enough. I
Right?
will succeed.
And-
I love myself. I love myself. I'm
And the
it
worst is
doesn't
when,
work.
imagine if Megan's having a bad day. I'm like, Megan, don't talk that way to
just
yourself.
say, you
right?
are enough.
Like,
you can do it. You're
Turn your frown
amazing.
upside down. So what's showing up in the research now is that affirmations don't work.
That they're complete disasters because your brain has a built-in bullshit meter that will tell you you're lying and actually makes you feel worse because you're lying to yourself and you know you're lying to yourself.
Yes. And
So
the
you
worst
feel
part of it,
worse.
is this. And now you feel you can't talk about what you believe is the truth.
Yeah.
Since everyone around you is saying, no,
That's
no,
right.
no.
Be like, no,
don't-
no,
no.
you're amazing.
Don't-
You'll be great. It's
And-
like,
and the
well,
worst
I don't
is-
feel like I'm going to be
No,
great.
but you know what they say? What's even worse is, no, don't use words like that.
Yeah, you should.
Don't
use
ever
those
talk about
words.
yourself that way.
Yeah.
So they have now told you,
Ugh.
right? And given you non-permission to speak to yourself, even though I feel like I don't know anything. No, don't ever talk to yourself that way. So guess what? I am not, my outer voice will never say it, but my inner voice is now, let's find the synonyms to not good enough, right? Like, let's find the synonyms for I feel inadequate.
All of our moms think
Yes.
we're amazing, by the way.
Yes,
Chris
all
is saying, but
moms.
my mom says I'm
Yeah.
amazing and I'm special. Yes, of course.
There's not a mother who doesn't find a positive light in everything
Yeah.
that usually goes on.
Yeah.
Unless you have some moms who are just really angry, different story though. But so going into the right, affirmations. So what do? You don't want to do these two things. So on the right side, the first thing to do that we found was this. Look, there are other solutions, but this is a solution we found worked in practice, adopted by people. Take the Dev GPS. It's a very simple, it'll take you 2 minutes and you have to self-eval, fill it out, get 3 or more peers, and then I get a coach, as in take the assessment so you can visually see where you are relative to what everyone else sees about you. And the second part is this, you have to share it. You have to share it. And the key is this, there's 2 parts in sharing it. You have to first be able to explain what you see. After you see your eval, you have to label it and explain. I'll tell you how that works. That's where we're going to go into detail. And then you have to present it, ideally to the group that assessed you for their feedback and reaction, which is what we call bringing it to light. The action of doing this takes people from this mindset of 49% self means I believe I do not have control over my life. 51%, as in the majority of the external factors control my life. You know, my bosses, my friends, the market, COVID, everything, you know, like I have the minority control over my life. It's what they call the victim mindset. Just by moving it 2 percentage points, you can become empowered. Like I love this phrase we got from one of the top business school professors in Columbia. Despite the constraints we have in our lives, we have a lot of constraints.
I'm laughing because
Right?
Carl's saying, I wonder if those numbers go up for married people, JK, sort of.
What do you mean?
You mean the numbers of the star, because I was looking at the chat, the victim to the
Oh,
empowerment.
I'm sure if you're married, you have more people to blame, right?
Yeah.
It's like, as long as you have more people in your household, like, yeah, the
Yeah.
49 probably drops to like what? I think I have like maybe 5-10% control, because now you got like my mother's in my house, my father's in my house. With
Yeah.
COVID, I mean, you have a lot
I
more,
have no
right?
control over my own life. So,
Yes.
yes.
But this is what I love. This guy said this, despite the constraints, what are my options and choices? We act like we have none. And I'm not saying ignore the constraints. Despite the
Yeah.
constraints, what are my options and choices?
Yeah.
And that mindset, that is an empowered mindset. That's the 51% mindset. And so despite how ugly this eval and assessment might be, to own it, and then like, it's kind of like, you know, you want to own your weakness and then learn to lead from that weak point, from that weakness, as opposed to, I'm so ashamed, I'm going to hide it and I'll talk about it. And then others around me will talk behind my back. And this is the whole thing going wrong. So this is the part on the right, right? And the whole, just be happy, be proud, be smile, this and that. I'm telling you, the human BS meter that you have in your head will be taking this little devil on your shoulder and turning it from Chris's tiny little baby to the size of Megan. And before I know it, it's so heavy, it's lopsiding over. It's
Not too
dangerous.
heavy, yeah.
You know,
Okay,
not,
yes, okay.
I mean, heavy as an elephant.
Yes,
heavy,
and
yes.
yes.
Anyways, on the left side, chasing big ideas. What I want you to think about on this is this. There's I can't remember who we got this from years ago, but this was really good. You know, when you see a cow in the ditch, the first thing you have to do is get the cow out of the ditch. And oftentimes, if you're in a leadership role, leaders like to do that. I'm going to stand outside the ditch and tell the people, get the cow out of the ditch. No, move the cow out. Come on, just drag. Get in the
cow.
ditch, right? There is no such thing as 0% doing, and I'm an authority figure that just waves my hand. Get in the ditch. If we're struggling to get the cow out of the ditch, first thing, get in the ditch, because you need to know what the actual work is. It's what they call stop armchair professoring and literally get in the ditch so that you know it in your bones of what the issues and problems are. But a lot of people then don't know about step 2, which is also important,
Yes.
right? Which is, how do I prevent the cow from going in the ditch? And when I go in the ditch on step 1, knowing I have to do step 2, there's a different mindset. I am trying to get the cow out of the ditch, but I'm also in my back of my head thinking, how did this happen? How do we prevent it from happening? Because the greatest organizations empower the individuals to do 1 and 2. The old industrial age model was this. All the people in the organization do 1, right? The bosses don't do 1 at all, right? They only focus on 2. And then you hire these outside consulting firms that go and get multi-million-dollar contracts to come in and tell the people in 1 how to do that better and prevent what they're doing wrong. And they produce this giant report that sounds fancy. And then the authority figures say, we know how to now improve our company, right? And that's, once again, industrial age model of working. That is quickly expiring and falls apart, doesn't work. And by the way, this 1 and 2 combined is the hard stuff. And this is where we talk about rituals and discipline and the hard stuff. The notion of everyone has to be a systems thinker, building systems.
I like how Paul is saying it from Children's Health in Dallas. If you don't do number 2, you'll end up doing 1 again. And that's the thing, right? And because
well, a lot of us are in these repeated roles of doing 1 every week.
Like, I'm really good at being a micro tactician, and I just want to stay in that ditch forever because I'm really good at that. Or, or I can't get out of it.
I hate my job. I have to do this over and over again. And we're like, so is there any way to actually think about how do I prevent that from repeating so often? And they'll say, use my brain and think about that. God, I'd rather gripe and tell you have to do this over and over again.
Yes, it's a different skill, but it is
anything repeating. A pattern, anything repetitive is actually solvable. It's the not repeating stuff that's hard to solve. We live, and so the litmus test usually on the left for the job is this. What's the stuff where every week, starting on Monday, you're like, this again? That whatever that job is, that's the hard stuff that you need to put a ritual, a discipline to attack. Not too much, because this stuff really sucks. So we're talking about usually no more than twice a week, but put a ritual and make it ritualistic. Every Monday, every Wednesday, do it, right? Even if it's 1 hour, half an hour, just do it consistently. And what you will find after 3 months of it, roughly 12 to 13 weeks, suddenly the repetitive nature of attacking it from 1 cow out of the ditch to prevent, you will build a system and you'll be like, you know what? That Monday is no longer, it's just kind of mostly automated. It's pretty good. It's not about technology, but you'll find business processes, rules. Then you look for the next And when you start to layer on these systems that you start building for all these small repetitive tasks, you will get to a place, because now your mind share is freed and you're always doing something productive. You're going to find MO. MO stands for momentum. When you find momentum, sometimes accidentally, that's where you're in a level 1-2, which we'll cover much more in another class. But this is basically the punchline of that 2%. Solo versus at a company team level. It's pretty much the same thing. Solo is on the right, take the Dev GPS, share it with people, right? On the left is use your wall for brain thinking and puzzling what you're strategizing and thinking, because we're no longer in the industrial age of it's all about muscles and turning wrenches. No, people count on you for your judgment calls. Even when you're coding, doing technical jobs, they care about your judgment call. At the bottom, it's almost similar, Dev GPS, but as a leader in a culture, organize your teams into 8 to 12 small groups. 8 to 12 people, small groups. We call them PRT. Once again, you can experience it through what we're offering here. And then on the left, the walls, but then create the shared PowerPoint where everyone can go in, ideally in small groups of 8 to 12, and see transparently what everyone else is doing. The ability to not feel alone and grow and learn together in public is the key. And getting that right increment of the small group, you will see is what leads to the right 2% change. So I'm going to go into a little bit more detail, and we have only 2 more slides here. One, and this was a pretty huge piece. We're going to share with you, and companies rarely do this, right? Who shares the proprietary IP, as in what makes an algorithm work. So when you score your Dev GPS, this is the first basis of the algorithm that's running, it's going to start running behind the scenes, what we call the AI or artificial intelligence coach for Dev GPS, and number 3 and number 5. That's the discipline and the hard stuff combined with this whole no LHF truth. So first off, if you score a 1-1, meaning you scored yourself a 1 below expectations and either your peers or your coach scored you a 1, you're in what we call the repeated error zone. When you're a repeated error, you've given up on yourself and others have given up on you too. You usually get calmed out, you get silence. People usually just skip you. It's like you don't exist sometimes. You need to find a way to break out of that, but that's first, label it correctly. 2-1 represents that I scored myself meeting expectations, but others said I am below. That's what we call the oblivious zone. 1-2 is when I scored myself low, but somehow others are scoring me higher. It's the manipulation zone. I'm brand managing myself. I've convinced my bosses, I've convinced my peers that I'm better at telling the truth. I'm more disciplined than they actually am. 2-2 is the adequate zone. The adequate zone is the zone of complacency, the zone of doing bare minimum. I know it, and so does everyone else. And these 1, 2, 3, and 4 are labels you can get stuck in. If you do this right, you want to get to a place where you're in 5. And 5 is interesting. This kind of the 5th label, 2-3 or 3-3. Oftentimes when you start improving, 3 represents exceeding expectations. Others will see it before you see it, which is why usually a 2-3 shows up before it becomes a 3-3. Wait, I thought I was the exact same. People are like, no, you're changed, you're upgraded. And so what the Dev GPS system will do is as you do your Dev GPS evaluation, it's like it's a 360, you can see visually graphed. It will give you a choice of labels to pick because it's going to make a recommendation that you should pick one of these labels based on what it's saying, and it will show you what it recommends it is. But then you have to explain the bullets, the ladders of inference. If it says that, you know what, I'm manipulating, it's up to you to put the bullets explaining it. But you might look at these 5 labels and not like them. And so you might say, you know what, I want another one. So it will give you an option of the other. Now you have to label what that other is and once again, explain.
And before you go on, Charlie, I was just thinking, I think you hit a nerve on the jobs part of the work we're just talking about, getting the cow out of the ditch and building a process to prevent it from going back in, building the systems.
Yes.
So I think like Heather was mentioning, she's lost a lot of respect for leaders who only do the second part, right? Like they're basically looking and saying
Of
somebody,
course.
right?
Yes.
And then Chris was saying, and I think this is the theme of sharing the with the team, you know, not to circle the problem and complain about it, but because it's often more than just your problem.
Yes.
Stop trying to fight it alone. And so Carla
So
was saying,
can I tell you my thought on this? And we were talking about
Just-
this.
yeah.
So in our jargon, we call it better me before better you, right?
yes,
Like, you know, it's a lot easier to criticize other parents, other leaders, just other people. And you know what is awesome? And this term integrity, the best definition of integrity is tied to leading by example. And they said, show everyone that you have consolidated your feces first,
get your shit
meaning
together.
get your shit together, right? And when you get your shit together and you start growing and improving, right? Why label number 5 shows up? We call it the teacher zone. You know how you know you're in the teacher zone? Everyone keeps asking for your time. Everyone keeps asking for your advice. Hey, I'm really curious what your morning is like. I'm curious what you do this. And I'm curious, like everyone is asking you. And that's when you know, wait, they're paying attention to what I did. They want to know what I did. And when you start teaching, you actually advance what you've learned. I'm going to show you, by the way, just one last slide. It's just I have 3 minutes here. This is an actual evaluation of a real person, right? So without telling you who it is, right? I'm going to show you. So although the evaluation covers all 5 points in the Dev GPS, I want you to focus your attention on number 3 and number 5. And what this is saying is this. First off, it's saying from the individual who they scored themselves a 1 on number 5, on this notion of telling the truth, I'm fully transparent. They said, I need improvement, right? The coach said, yes, you need improvement, you're 1. That's the repeated error zone. We know you do it, you know you do it, you've given up on that part, right? Because I'm tired of giving you the same advice and nothing changes. But this is what's weird, the peers, not weird, but the peers are saying, no, I give you a 2, you're much better than that.
Yeah.
And so that's the manipulation zone because I'm saying, I know I'm not really telling the truth and they're saying, I think you are. That means I've successfully manipulating.
Jay's asking, is there ever a situation when it's a 1-3? Yeah, you could
Yeah.
rate yourself a 1.
It's
and
even worse.
It's even worse. It's saying
On the acting job you have to create that level of gap.
you're really good at manipulating.
Yes. So the same thing on the discipline side, right? The coaches, you're saying 1, the coach is saying 1, right? That's like, kind of, it's repeated error. The manipulation, everyone all around you, your peers are saying, no, I think you're really disciplined. And you yourself are scoring yourself a 1, saying, I'm not. But, and I'm below what I know I can do. And everyone's saying, no, I think you're definitely doing what you can do.
Yeah.
Right? Meeting expectations. And so you can pick another label, but the ability to do this exactly, label it, explain the bullets, now meet in your small team and explain these labels of what you see in your eval, explain your assumptions and logic underneath each label, now open for feedback and reaction. And if they can't give it to you live, there's a feedback app that helps them do it anonymously in that group. And the process of doing that messy process of understanding what others see you as versus what I see myself as, and making this labeling helps the discussion get more productive as opposed to open-ended.
Christy's asking, is it manipulation or is it low self-confidence? Am I rating myself?
Sorry,
low?
Dan's on the call, by the way, I'm done. Sorry,
Oh,
I'm 1 minute
Jesus
early,
Christ.
sorry. So what was the question?
Is it manipulation or is it low self-confidence? You rate yourself so low that your peers and your coach are rating you higher. It's saying you're manipulating. You might just be
Yes.
but then you're unaware, right?
This is good. Well, so that would be oblivious if you're unaware.
If you're unaware, it's
Right.
oblivious, yeah.
So when you look back at the scoring, right?
And Dan is saying
Oh.
it could be a tendency to lean dark versus light, meaning
Oblivious
I'm
is,
more pessimistic. I don't want to, because this happens, right? You don't want to act like
so manipulation is a tough word for
it's
people.
yeah,
And we deliberately picked a tough word. Maybe going forward, we might tweak the words over time, but I like the word personally because it hopefully should make you discomforted enough to change.
yeah.
Because the part you have to think about is this. So people will say, I feel insecure.
Yeah.
Right? But everyone else thinks you're doing a pretty damn good job. So the question I would ask you is, how much energy are you putting
Yes.
to get them to think that?
Yeah.
What are you saying and doing and not volunteering? When you feel insecure, you're like, something comes up and I have like a diarrhea full of crap I like to say about myself, but I'm not going to volunteer that. So how hard are you working to not volunteer that, to not speak at that moment, lest by accident I show the side of me that shows that I don't know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Like, what effort does it take to lie, hide, and fake?
Mm-hmm.
And what we have found working with the top neuroscientists, actually it was the team that trained Tom Brady. We did work with the 2 top brain doctors for Tom Brady, the football star, was that lying takes twice as much effort than telling the truth.
Yeah.
So when you're lying, hiding, faking, that's the manipulation. You're spending energy keeping up that image, that brand. And that's the thing that's a mismatch. What
Right.
you yourself are saying I am is mismatched with everyone thinking you're better than me.
Without question, it's a big discussion here, right? Because I've more myself, I've struggled with that, right? Which is yes, I have glass half empty. He's got the glasses half full. There's the pessimism, optimism. There's also the belief in yourself and not the insecurity, the arrogance. But I think the truth, I think what you're saying, by not giving the truth, because sometimes when you feel like, well, I'm rating myself lower because I feel relative to other people, but then somebody presses your buttons and you're like, you know what? I'm amazing. I can do this. I've done this. You're actually holding in. Now, if you really feel that way, it's different. But I think there's many cases, I know I've experienced, done this myself, where it's like, I'm more likely to, I'm more insecure. So I might rate myself lower, but when push really comes to shove on some things, I will flip out if I feel like somebody, you know what I mean?
So can I tell you what's fascinating? You know how, like, I think as you move to this information age, there's certain words now you just can't use. It's almost like they should be struck from vocabulary, right? Because if you use them, it just makes you an ignorant, bigot, whatever it is, right? But then there's certain words if you use, like, people think highly of you, right? Like words like vulnerability. Ooh, that's a good word now, right? Humility is another one of those. The humble brag.
Yeah, the humble
We
brag.
actually
yes.
think, right? If I humble brag, that's good, right? Brag is bad, but
Yes,
humble
yes,
brag is
yes,
good.
yes.
We have mastered the act of fake humility.
Yeah, like I would rather hurt myself and like harm myself than
Yeah.
let somebody else. Like if I think I'm doing well at something, and
I remember this conversation they had
That's
with
that's harder.
so one of the biggest tech companies in Australia is Atlassian.
Oh,
I spent
yeah.
time with the CEO of Atlassian. And he said, you know, when we hire people and after they start, I asked them a question after they start. How do we do in meeting, you know, exceeding or like
Yeah.
based on your expectation? You had a perception, right? Based on everything we told you. Did we do better or worse? And you know, most CEOs, most leaders want to say, oh, like this place is much better than I thought, right? Because it's better to say, I expected so much when I came in, it was really bad, right? So you kind of like oversold yourself. Did we oversell or undersell? And he asked that question. And his point was both answers are bad. If we are underselling, then we're not going to get the best talent we can for what we actually have. If we're overselling, they're going to come in and realize this, I got oversold, they're going to leave.
Yeah.
Both are bad.
It's interesting that
Right?
what Josh Hayes is saying, actually manipulation, like it's manipulating others, but you could be manipulating yourself. I think that is
So
a great way to think about it.
Except, can I tell you what happens? This is the craziest part. And we did a lot of work in this field, especially remember with Doc and all the Optigate, the vitals report we did.
Yeah.
You know the truth.
Yes.
It's like one of those like little kind of tickles you have, you know, but you did something and everyone acted a certain way. So you're like, huh, maybe I was wrong.
Yeah.
And then that happens more and more. And over time, you start to forget that you kind of had an inkling that, you know, the whole idea of, I think I'm not that funny, but everyone laughed when I said it.
Yeah.
So then I'm like, huh, maybe I am funny. And then as a result, I start telling more jokes and you see the laughs are there, but a little more uncomfortable laughs and they kind of don't cut you off. But you're like, but they said I was funny.
Yeah.
But you kind of, if you can really remember back, you remember that fork where you're like, I don't think I'm funny.
Yeah.
You have that 51% right judgment of yourself, but through the distortion coming from other people, you go on this kind of like haywire trip and you're like, I'm a really funny person. And that's why I like to start all meetings with a joke.
Yeah.
And everyone's like, oh God, here it goes again. Ha 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 ha. And you're not even picking up, the laughs are getting more fake. And so I remember we have taken evals like this and explained what we're seeing in the manipulation in front of people, reading their evals. And literally the craziest comments we get is, how the hell are you figuring this out? Who told you? How do you know what's actually happening in my head? The idea of the red arrow behavior is that we created this red sphere around us so that basically we're living in this bubble, right? An echo chamber of BS. It's BS because the truth is what we need to know to figure out how to get better, but we are aiding the process of keeping ourselves in this bubble of bullshit, of BS. You can't succeed. And this is where you can do factory work. You can come and clock in and move some boxes from point A to point B. But if you need to make a judgment call, especially in stuff that is not repeated, and if it's repeated, the expectation is for you to build a system to prevent the cow from going in the ditch. When you have to use your brain, if your brain power, as in 2/3 of your brain, is being spent trying to fake it, hide it or lie, the LHF, you will see that relative to those who are not, good luck, because you're going to lose. You're going to lose if you enter the race with a 1/3 brain and they're coming up with close to 2/3, if not full brain. So knowing how to dial that down and fix that self-driven impediment, which we have convinced ourselves it's good for us, it's actually not. Because in this new century, if you don't use your head, you will be fired. You will make mistakes. You will hurt other people. And trust me, your teammates and your enterprise, your organization will not stand for it. Mm-hmm. Even at this point, kids won't stand for it from parents. Like it's not the same as the old days.
Chris from Cleveland, Ohio was saying, thanks for, I don't know if he's still with us, but and by the way, I think Denise was wondering how long this goes. And yes, we were trying to end in an hour and we did. The slides were over doing Q&A. And Dan Walker said, you've earned more time today, Charlie. You clearly killed it, buddy.
That's right. Did you say earn more time, meaning I went over?
So no, he was like, you earned more time because you're doing a great job, right?
I appreciate that, but I still want to point out 11:59.
But Chris, I don't know if he's still here, but he said, I'm looking forward to learning more on transitioning from an industrial model to a more responsive information model. I feel like at the highest,
maybe do you want to unmute?
Chris, I don't know if he left. Sorry.
Which Chris?
As no.
you wanna unmute and-
Cleveland, Ohio. Are you still with us? And then Lori Jarvis, you asked a question I wanted to get to too. I think he might have left. I think that this idea of the 2% change, like moving how we started, right?
Mhm.
The whole title of this presentation is to make this 2% change in this crawl, walk, run, starting with yourself and then for your team, Dev GPS, the walls, the jobs, get the cow out of the ditch. So we're gonna keep simplifying it. And keep working
But
through
also
that.
just
That
know
was-
this. I mean, we spent
Yeah.
a lot of time with some of the most senior people in almost every industry. They are starving, as in they are looking within, not outside. This is not about recruiting and hiring.
Yeah.
They're looking within their own team, their own organization for someone who gets it, right? That's the thinking part. And someone who's doing it and is moving and what they
Yeah.
call that, tight OODA loop. Remember the whole fast sense making, fast thinking, doing? They're looking for this. Those are the people they want to promote.
Yeah.
There's so much ambiguity that leadership is facing. They look around the horizon and products and services and competition, everything's changing. Oh my God, right? I want someone who can navigate complexity and ambiguity and uncertainty and just all of that and just go get it done,
Just go get it
right?
done.
And then, by the way, not only are they so good at doing it so consistently and predictably, they're infecting and teaching others. Oh my God, right? You tell them that the better you is infecting so better me is becoming a better you. And it's like this, good team that's growing, like a strong one person per team, to two people to then
Yeah.
they're all looking for this. And we have not met an organization, whether it's the Department of Education, whether it's the CIA or the military or what's the London version, the IC, I can't remember the names.
CGHQ or something like that.
Yeah.
Like GCHQ.
I have no idea. It doesn't sound as good as CIA.
Something like that.
GCH, maybe
I was reminded by The Crown I watched this
Oh.
weekend. I was like, oh yeah.
But
how
like
this look into our-
charter schools, nonprofits, even small startups, right?
Mhm.
Everyone is looking for that person. And the biggest thing they've done, because we're still working on the industrial age mindset, we all think hiring is the key.
Mhm.
And how many people say, the key to success is hire properly and then get out of the way? Good luck. Hire properly and get out of the way.
I mean, the reality is we're all head cases. So you're just going to be hiring other head cases. We all
but
have
also
head
this is the
cases.
case. I always tell people when we coach a lot of leaders, think about this hire. The new hire is the MVP.
Mhm.
Just like the new boss, the new promoted leader is the MVP. Just like a business plan before you start is like an
Yeah.
amazing business plan.
Yeah.
As soon as you start, you're like, uh-oh. The honeymoon period sometimes is shorter and shorter now. As soon as it's over, you're like, I really thought this one was the MVP, the most valuable player that would solve our problems. The more likely thing to happen on your new boss, new promotion, new hire, the new project, the new idea, right? I want you to think of the worst hire you've ever had, the worst boss you ever had, right? The worst project, the worst idea. Because the likelihood, as in like 80, 90% likelihood, that's what you're gonna get,
Yeah.
is higher.
Yeah.
It's easier to go and play roulette and win
Yeah.
than think that a new hire is going to solve your problems. So, given that, right, the best sports teams, we've seen this, they don't obsess on the draft saving them. They obsess on developing their existing staff better than anybody else. And so it starts with you. And if you lead by example there, that's the integrity. You will infect others and you quickly become teacher simply because everyone's asking you and they want to know what you're doing. That's how you win.
Lori asked a question, Lori
Yeah.
Jarvis. Lori, you
You
can
wanna
if you
unmute Lori?
go ahead. It's kind of related to what we talked about last night.
Which question was it, Megan, that you had wanted me to follow up on?
Or
It's up to
just
you if there's something else.
ask whatever question you want, Laura.
It kind of was brought up by Tammy as well. I just kind of was curious, about why people are more inclined to give unfiltered feedback, if you will, and then why some people are more resistant to being not lying, hiding, faking in their feedback.
Yeah. So
I think you said the same thing.
why are some people more inclined to give more direct feedback, whereas others might be more inclined to hold back
Yes.
or to focus on one aspect? Kind of
So-
the passive aggressive.
So what's interesting is I think we had shared this one of the earlier LIP classes. There's a woman named Kim Scott who showed a good framework for this.
Yeah.
She called it radical candor, right? Radical candor is the same as tough love, because we're not talking about being brutal and being a jerk, right? But usually a lot of feedback, and feedback is tough because usually it's called recognition when it's good. When it's critical, it's called feedback, right? It's like when someone says, I have feedback for you,
Yeah.
I don't think, ooh, let me get my champagne glass because I can't wait to hear what you're going to say. No, when someone says, I have feedback for you, like, uh-oh, what did I do, right? When someone says, I have some, gratitude for you, or I have some recognition, you're like, oh, let me get my champagne glass.
Yes.
So feedback usually is negative.
Yeah.
This is where we struggle. Because she called it radical. There's a 4-part quadrant. Radical candor was the best. The worst was
Obnoxious aggression.
No.
Ruinous empathy.
I always get manipulative
Manipulative insincerity. Sorry.
right?
Manipulative.
You're basically manipulating,
Yes.
right? Like, and we all have people like that. It's the
Yeah.
worst, right?
Yeah.
You know, when they say, like, it was interesting, this discussion we have with the former head of the Navy, he said, one of the things he taught people was when you see someone that works for you, never ask one question.
Yeah.
How are you doing? Right? Always ask 2, 3, or more, because that shows genuine interest in them. How many people ask you, how are you doing? And then you're trying to talk, and then they're like, great, good. And they didn't even listen. They never really even cared nor meant what they said. But someone who says, how are you doing? Hey, you don't look like you're having a good day. Like
Yeah.
that notion, we call it gas.
Yep.
Give a shit factor. You want to meet people who have gas, right? Gas for you, gas for others, gas for themselves. But a lot of us don't do that. It seems a lot more efficient to just act the part.
Mm-hmm.
How are you doing? Right? Everyone good? Everyone happy? Good, good, good. It's like, were you really interested? Because you can tell by my face and looking at her, she has no clue what you're saying and is not having a good day. But so this notion of being insincere, worst possible, the best being radical candor. So then comes the real in practice test. Before you become perfect or before you become horrible, there are these in-between states. And the real choice we face is between those two states. One is what she called obnoxious aggression. Said another way, it's being a jerk. You know, when you give someone direct feedback, you almost have to it's like ripping the bandage off. A lot of times we just need to say, okay, this is gonna hurt, right? And they're like, God, what a jerk,
Yeah.
right? They're just being direct but it's this notion of, it's hard to be direct without trying to fluff it up with niceness. Then there was this other choice we have called ruinous empathy. Ruinous empathy is, Laurie, just looking at you, you seem like a really accomplished, really bright person. I mean, before I give you this feedback, I just want to say, I'm so impressed with you. Just the question itself, your career, blah, blah, blah. And I think you could probably get better, but God, I love your outfit. I love your shoes. Like some people do the shit sandwich. We taught a whole class on how not to give feedback. The choice we face usually is, do I choose ruinous empathy or do I choose obnoxious aggression? And the reason is this, do you ever go to certain hotels or certain places that have what they call the transit lounge, right? You can't stay in the transit lounge very long. It's a transit zone. And you're supposed to move out of it. These two are transit zones. And so based on which one you pick, you end up in one place. If you pick ruinous empathy, right? I'm choosing not to be honest, choosing not to be direct, and I'm drowning it in what they call niceness, which is usually what's referred to as inauthentic kindness. Eventually, people see you as insincere. You manipulate and you are insincere. So if you pick, and we commonly pick ruinous empathy, we don't even recognize where it's heading to. Others see us. I don't believe what Laurie says, like even when you're honest, I don't believe you, right? And so you become that. If you pick obnoxious aggression, now this is the tough one. If you stick with it, you will one day get to a place of radical candor. Now people say, oh, that's not always true. They're such a jerk. Well, here's the other part that has to happen though. If you do obnoxious aggression, you deserve some truth back at you from everybody else, right? And that truth over time will course correct what is seemingly like being a jerk and being an asshole to learn how to go from just tough to tough love. Because if not, your organization will reject you. Your team will say, you know what? Hey, you might tell the truth, but you're just an asshole. No asshole rule here, so out.
Yeah.
But this is the part, if you stick with it and open up for that truth coming both ways, you will adjust over time. All human beings, as long as you get truth, adjusts. And you get to the place of being able to do tough love or radical candor.
Devani's asking, is there a third, as in choose to be professionally honest with guidance?
But what does that even mean?
Yeah. Because the problem is if you try to be professionally, like, what does that mean? You like, it's almost like where the love comes out first. It's really hard to give the tough stuff. I think that's why.
You know, like, you know what's fascinating when it comes to our system one, our intuition? We think we can control it.
Yeah.
A lot less than you think. So like, if those of you who play poker, ever play poker tournaments, right? I play enough. My wife's actually better, but it's amazing when I play poker tournaments. If I start playing loose means I'm playing reckless. I almost can't course correct. I play the whole thing loose and I just kind of get out. I play too aggressive. But if I start playing tight, which means I'm playing like, you know, really tight, like only good hands playing whatnot, I can maintain playing tight in the game. Intuition, system one, works very similar. Like if you start being authentic, being direct, you can hold being direct. But if you start by fluffing it up and being passive aggressive and adding all the stuff, you will see that you can't navigate your way to direct. You'll see on their face, they're like waiting for the punch and you're seeing, oh my God, I can't say it now. You know, like the classic example is going to the doctor's office and, you know, they have the test results, right? Imagine you got like a COVID test and you sit down and they said, well, the good news is the results came back super fast. You're like, what? Like, can you just start with good or bad? Like, why even the feedback app got built the way it is over the years was the notion of before you go into blah, 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 and all the bullets, I'm trying to read, is this feedback good or bad? The score will tell you if it's good or bad. 1 is bad, wrong direction. 2 is okay, adequate. 3 exceeds, 4 far exceeds. So as I read it, I don't have to figure out, what are you saying? You know, when you read stuff, how many times do we say, is that a compliment? Was that a criticism? Am I being fired? Am I being promoted? Like, you know, all the movies where you're like, I think I got promoted. And you go tell your friend, they're like, dude, they just fired you. Like, that's what tends to happen. We like.
And I think maybe where we're coming from, Tavani, is that it's like, yes, you can try, here's how we, you know, here's some techniques, see if this works. I think the point is, once you've tried something long enough and it's not working is when you're like, okay, that's not working, but people keep trying that same approach. It's like over time trying to actually upgrade somebody significantly, you realize if you're those
But it's not even upgrade someone. I'm just saying what Tavani's saying is how we've been brainwashed from the industrial age. They're just ways to talk to people, right? Like you can't say it this way. You must start with, literally, there are organizations we have helped that literally train every leader to give the shit sandwich. And they say the more shit you have, you just need more bread, right? So they just teach you how to apply bread on both sides of the criticism. Like, and they don't realize like you can't get to the truth. And the person receiving is leaving so confused, right? So should I correct or not? Because I heard I heard there were 2 pieces of bread, 1 piece of shit in the middle. I think I'm okay.
That's the confirmation bias. You hear what you want to hear.
And then they do
right?
the whole, no, it's perfect. So I think maybe I'm getting promoted.
Yeah.
And then next thing you know, they're like either calmed out, demoted.
Well, yeah.
And they're like, I don't understand what happened.
Yeah.
It's actually cruel to mislead people. Brene Brown said this, I love. Being direct is kind. Being clear is kind. Clear is kind. Clear and direct is kind.
But it's so freaking hard to do.
It's hard to do.
This is the point of Michael, it's cracking me up. A bigger shit sandwich tastes extra shitty. So basically give smaller shit sandwiches along the way and then you won't have to eat one big one. Is that right? I mean, it's true. In little doses, it's better than waiting.
I don't know about you, but I hate shit sandwiches. I just don't like them. I don't want them. I don't like them. I don't want to surround myself with people who give them, right?
But the reality is it's actually so I struggled with this obviously more, I think, in terms of like, and so I think this Dev GPS, why I'm loving this, is that when somebody is diagnosing or evaluating or assessing themselves, it makes it, and then they're getting peer, then it's easier to help them because they're seeing versus the whole authority figure piece, right? You're my boss, so you're supposed to tell me I suck. So it's like, who cares? I'm not even listening to you. When you see your peers and then you see the gap,
you know what's
now you're like, wait a minute, I'm listening.
Can I tell you what's fascinating?
Because I always say, why do I have to be the asshole? Why do I have to tell somebody who's oblivious? And I'm the one who has to tell them. And it feels like it's a repeated thing over and over. At some point, I'm like, hey, I'm done being the asshole, telling you the same thing over and over and over again.
But can I tell you what's fascinating? Why is reality TV, which is a lot cheaper than produced TV, so popular?
Mm,
Why is YouTube
yeah.
more popular than just produced television with professional actors and all the stuff, right? I mean, raw footage,
Mhm.
TikTok, like, you know, just, you know, Clubhouse, the reason it got popular is because it's authentic. It's unscripted, it's live, and people say stuff. It's almost like
Yeah.
as much as we have cancel culture and have to be politically correct and everything, you know, every one of us, we're craving real.
Yeah.
Like, as you go into leadership, people think, well, I succeeded because I kind of, you know, didn't said the right things and whatnot. But I'm telling you, the game changes because once you get to the top, right? And if you want to get to the very top, you have to be real. And you're scared shitless that then when they see the real you, they will reject you. No, you will see they will love you more. We had this whole discussion
Yeah.
with the former Navy that the imposter syndrome, being yourself, being authentic is so difficult. To be like vulnerable is literally that scary stuff, not fake vulnerability, the scary stuff where you think I just lost everyone, all my friends, all the people, because they now know that I suck. I don't know what I'm doing. And oddly, you find that, wait, people rally and they still like me. This is the part, I love this phrase we got from
Yeah.
this Navy officer once. He said, you have to recognize being human is being a misfit. We are all misfits. But you know what great leaders do? They show people that I am a misfit too. And I want to see you. I don't want to see the acting hidden. I want to see the misfit you. And you know the greatest feeling in the world? The greatest feeling in the world is when someone says, I'm a misfit, you're a misfit, but you're our misfit. That's team. When they accept you and they say, you are my team, you are our misfit. We're misfits together and we're part of the team. That is literally what they call home. 21st century home is finding that tribe, that team that literally, despite seeing the misfit you and despite seeing the misfit others, I feel at home because I can be myself.
Mhm.
I don't have to spend the energy faking it and hiding and, you know, like acting and trying to, like, I can just literally ask my dumb questions. I can give you my reactions without, so can I filter all I'm going to say through the Google filter that says what you cannot say these days? Like, just speak.
You know, because
Right?
Brent was saying to Chris, like, because Chris was saying it's so hard to be the asshole, right? I think Charlie has the same perspective, doesn't like to be the asshole, but he's elevated it to an art form, be the jerk people need. And here's what's interesting, because I think related to Lori, this whole conversation got brought up because why do some people can do it and others can't? I think the truth is truly that I'm not as comfortable being myself, because if I could give them more critical feedback, be the asshole, I'm going to get it back. I'm afraid to get it back is the truth.
Mhm.
Like, I'm afraid to hear, if I say to somebody, if I'm,
Truth
then they're
begets
gonna,
more truth.
they're going to give it back to me.
Yes.
And so I can do it. I don't do it as frequently. It's hard. And I think the truth is that like, it's like
People don't believe this.
yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
I started the company in 1994 and I put the company almost out of business 6 times, but up till 2002, we went from 150 employees down to 4 people, right? I mean, I was really just doing the worst job imaginable. I avoided conflict like the plague. I could not make difficult decisions. Every difficult discussion I just couldn't have. And when people had them, I literally would tell people, can we just try to be positive? Like, look at the bright side of things. You see me now, you won't believe that was me. I could not do it. I literally could not. And I convinced myself that's just not the way I am, right? I'm a positive person. I like, you know, I'm good at rallying and pep talking people,
Yeah.
not giving them bad news. So like, you know, I would ask like a Greg or somebody, can you go tell them the bad news? Like just, I just can't, you know? And I realized as a company pretty much almost went out of business, I had 60 days of bloody noses every day and eviction notices. And I saw myself through my own actions, almost killing my baby I started. And when I realized, wait a second, what is this bullshit I've told myself I can't? Of course I can. It's a choice. I'm choosing not to, but like most things, it's a skill. It's a muscle. The more I do it, the better I get,
Better you get it.
right? And you know what people never realize when it comes to building skills? This is the transition window. We had this whole discussion even with this Navy head, say practicing vulnerability, right? It is literally like catching COVID. Do you know if you catch COVID right now? None of us knows if it's going to be like a light cold and over, right? Or maybe for kids, it's like nothing.
Or you're gonna die.
Or you could die. What's it going to be? I don't know, which is why it's so scary. When you practice this stuff, right? As in whether it's giving direct
for me to
feedback.
practice giving really brutal, honest truth feels like that. For people who are more arrogant and sharing being vulnerable, that act of courage for them feels like, you know, jumping off a cliff.
But all
For
of
me,
it.
it feels
I'm
like
saying for
all of it, but you never
don't know
you
how
don't
it's going
know,
to turn
right.
out. Is it death? Is it the end of me? Or is it like not even there?
Yeah.
And the problem is this, some of us, just like COVID, skated through,
Yes.
barely affecting you. You're like, hey, that's not bad at all. It's an overhyped thing. And then you see somebody else who like lost family like last week or last month.
Yeah.
You don't know how it turns out, which is why what leaders fail to recognize, when you move from level 1 to level 2, there's a level 1-2 state.
Yeah.
You need to create the space because you don't know what will show up. The first time you practice vulnerability, the first time you practice giving radical candor as in direct feedback without the fluffy bread all around, you don't know what will come out of you. You don't know how you'll react. And so because of that, it's like learning. So we actually work with people who coach professional gymnasts. Can you imagine teaching them to do the crazy stuff they do, but with no netting, no mats? Just why don't we try straight on concrete? Just toughen you up, right?
Mhm.
You'll hurt and kill everyone or hurt people.
Yeah.
Like you need to provide the netting. You need to provide what we call the circles of safety before, like, do not start any of this saying, you know what, this is a great class. I'm going to go straight to my Facebook, right? I'm going to go straight to the internet and just boom, right? I'm just going to go on a feedback giving rampage, right? No LHF from now on, everyone I cross, right? You walk by the streets, ugly baby, you ugly. I mean, just literally, please don't do that, right? You'll see that it takes practice to get good, which means you need to recognize that you're going to fall and you're going to really fuck it up before you know how to do this right. And so you need to be around people who will accept you for that misfit version of yourself. And ideally, if they're also practicing their misfit, you can kind of laugh at it together. You can be like, wow, that was really cool manipulation you did, right? Did you notice I did the same thing? Oh my God, let's try to dial that down next time.
Do this in your PRT teams. That's a safer group, right? They don't work with you.
Yes. So that's part of why we
Yeah.
networked you into these small teams of 8 to 12 PRT teams. These are complete strangers, right? And by the way, this Zoom class is recorded. The PRT is not, right? It will not be released. Nobody will see it. So like you get to say whatever the hell you want and no one knows, right? It's like weird. We can do this stuff better with strangers sometimes. And we really, I mean, the worst of this, try to do it with your spouse and family. Oh, wrong place to start. You make some mistakes, you're going to pay the price for as long as you're married, right? And even afterwards, they will keep paying the price with that one example. Yeah. So we all need that space, right? It's like human skills. It's kind of like being in a laboratory. You need the space to blow up the test tubes. And for someone to be like, what is this? Glass on the floor, paint on the walls, blown up test tubes. You're like, yeah, I'm trying to learn. Like the whole,
No, what?
I was going to say the elevator story going in and out was learning patience, but nonetheless, we'll share that some other time. We need to run. We've got a call with the former Inspector General of the Navy. There's some cool stuff happening, but we're overstimulated babies. So, although we're not babies. But
Makes no sense, but you know, it's okay.
can't shut the brain off. But this stuff is getting very interesting, accelerating very